Hello and welcome to Moving Through Menopause. And I'm so happy to welcome my friend Sorina Evans. Sorina is a practice nurse, and the practice nurse is often the first port of call when we, women in particular, visit the doctor, and sometimes that's for our well woman checks, isn't it? Welcome, Sorina. It's lovely to see you.
Thank you, Philippa. Nice to be with you.
So unfortunately today, Sorina, we're up against Euro 2020. It's a bit confusing, to be honest. So there is a match going on, kicking off at 5 o'clock. So it may be that we're on our own. Oh, no, we're not. Actually, we've got 3 people. So, these people obviously are not football supporters. So welcome if you're listening, watching, and so we're kicking off today talking about HRT, to HRT or not to HRT, and so the first thing really comes, how do we know that we are menopausal or perimenopause, and when to intervene? So, like we were just saying, lots of women might come to see the practice nurse for the regular well woman checks, the good old smear test, and so this is sometimes a time that you might spot a change, perhaps, and so tell me again about this.
Well, most of us, I don't think there are many women that I've met that they don't know they're going through menopause. One, because your mum probably went all hot flash and, snappy with you or whatever. And you were told that maybe you were told, because there was a era when it wasn't talked about, wasn't it, really? So, but majority of women who come for their smear, they do tend to know if they are or not premenopausal. And they will start, well, I don't know. Usually the consultation, if everyone remembers that, or if they have gone to have their smear done, usually is any changes, anything that is different from last time you had your smear regularly. Is anything that you want to ask? Is anything a problem? And they soon enough will know that their periods are all over the place, which is your premenopausal sign. Night sweats, which are not very nice. Anxiety, one of the things that a lot of the women don't realize, all of a sudden they'll come and say, I don't know, I'm just so anxious, and I never been anxious before, ever. I don't know what's going on. And then I go through all the other symptoms, and soon enough we find out that actually is a premenopausal or perimenopausal symptom.
And so, obviously, vaginal dryness is part of this, potentially part of this picture, and that's where the smear test comes in, because it might have been, although it's not something that you write on your bucket list, is it? It might have been that it was tolerable, and then all of a sudden it's not quite as tolerable as it used to be, and so this is a reason why sometimes you might be the first person to have this discussion with a woman, that you're up close and personal, and you start to notice that there are other symptoms appearing. And I mean, to be honest, for me, it was really much more around the sleep, the hot sweats, and the memory. Oh my goodness, that still is a concern. But so, basically, the idea of diagnosing the perimenopause, menopause states is really speaking to the symptoms over and above anything else that might be used. We talk about the symptoms being a diagnostic tool.
Exactly.
So it's really based on the symptoms that we might choose to intervene.
Yes, and you are right. quite often we even forget that we have those symptoms. I would have women who turn up for their smear, and you start your consultation. Have you had this and have you had the other? Your typical, and you change in a discharge and so on. And then it comes to the procedure itself. And then all of a sudden, you see this panic on the woman's face saying, "Oh, this didn't used to hurt before. What's going on?" And then when you slowly start unpacking, well, how are you finding your sexual life? Do you find sex difficult? Do you find it more painful than in the past? And then, slowly they do. It appears that tends to be one of them that is forgotten. We kind of live with it. We learn to live with it. And then you find yourself at a procedure that was normal, and that alarms you.
Mm.
And yes, and then we go from there.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so basically, the indications for hormone replacement therapy, the top one, that's, as far as I understand it, is the management of the hot flushes, or the temperature regulation. Is that your experience?
Well, how long is a list of symptoms in menopause? Some women say that it's not long enough, and definitely everyone is different.
Mm,
Um, yes, hot flashes is one, but then you have urinary symptoms because of the vaginal dryness,
mm,
which actually is not a urinary infection, it's just a dryness that gives that sensation and makes you feel like you need to go to the toilet more often, but actually you don't.
mm.
Um, a change in smell, change in skin is not quite as it was. So there are a lot of changes. It's not just that mere um, hot flash. And some women don't necessarily have hot flashes, they have other symptoms.
Well, this is it. But for me, on my journey, it seemed to me that whenever I spoke to a doctor, if I wasn't having hot flushes, I didn't qualify for HRT. Okay, so they were much more likely to give me an antidepressant for the fact that I couldn't sleep, and I was anxious and low mood, and occasional hot flush, which you know for me was the least of my problems. And so the GP was definitely not keen to part with the HRT based on those symptoms, and that it did seem to hinge around the thermal regulation piece of the puzzle. But you're saying that's not the case.
Not everyone does,
Mm. And I mean,
and
this is the
is
thing.
having that, yeah, is having that kind of, I don't know, the right person to talk with. I know they're all GPs and they're well trained, but they all have an area of expertise, and finding that person who in your surgery is doing women's health and is doing the coils, fittings, and so on. They are the ones who actually have more expertise and deal more. And men don't man GP, nothing wrong with a man GP. They are very good. But even they say themselves that women not necessarily are going to go and talk with a man about menopause problems. So therefore they are updated, but maybe not that updated, or the update was longer than it should have been. They know about it, but they don't know what's on the market. They don't know necessarily in detail
Yeah, and I
more
mean,
than someone who's got an interest in it.
yeah, well, exactly. So if you're an interested party, you undertake the regular updates, you take the training when it's offered. And
Mm.
so there is this huge variation. And I'm a physiotherapist, a healthcare professional, and I know, across the board, there is huge variation because we all have our area that we are of particular interest. So, and I think that's
Exactly.
right, that you want to be seeking out somebody who has that degree of expertise, who has undertaken the most recent update
Yes.
in the training. And I know that you completed an update recently.
Yes.
Did anything come out of that had changed as far as you were concerned?
The all the research that there was done a while ago in the late 90s, early 2000s, and which tried to discredit HRT to make it like this dangerous tablet, dangerous treatment which would put our life at risk and all the rest of it, which you all heard of it, and we all just stay back. I mean, we have that generation of women who, like you say, HRT is like, panic just set in, and you could hear it. I would just cope as my grandmother did, and you kind of think, well, how do you know how your grandmother did cope with it? Because they didn't talk about it. It was all hush, hush, and do not talk. So, yeah. So all that is been proven not to be true. And yes, there are some risks. Yes, there is no more than a combined pill for the contraception. So having a healthy BMI, if you had history of clots, then yes, the combined HRT, because there are so many other types of HRT. You can have pessaries, you can have creams, and they all have an effect and it will help you. You don't have to necessarily take a tablet that will put you at risk. So that is what, yet again, that's been reinforced that actually, no, it's not a risk. Yes, as we grow older, we do have an increased risk for stroke and heart disease, but that is all combined with lifestyle. And actually exercise and diet, we all, regardless if we need HRT or not, we should have a healthy lifestyle, because that prevents us from developing these diseases. But one thing that it did struck me as a woman, I would say, that the studies that have been done following all kind of undoing the old research, they've done more studies, and HRT does reduces the risk of colorectal cancer and heart disease, funnily enough, and does reduce the risk of fractures to some extent. Of course, if we take it early enough, it prevents dementia.
Yeah, so this is interesting, isn't it? This is very interesting.
Yeah.
So that actually it can have protective properties.
Exactly.
And we're talking protection of the heart, the bones,
Yeah.
the colon, which is kind of not something that we necessarily would associate with HRT, but I am aware of that. And then, like you said, if taken early enough, okay, with the brain.
Yes.
And I am aware with listening to podcasts and educating myself that there is a window of opportunity when it comes to the brain.
Yes.
And so currently, we're not entirely clear on what that window is, but that there is suggestion that there is a window, and that if you don't intervene quickly enough, the estrogen receptors in the brains will close. So like a lock and key, the estrogen is the key, and you've got or is it the lock? Anyway,
one of the two.
The lock and the key, yeah. And the estrogen is the key, and the lock in the brain will wither and become non-receptive to, so essentially the estrogen no longer has that brain protective effect. And so there's a lot of research still to be done in this area, and but there's absolutely no doubt. I was speaking with somebody yesterday who said really our only symptom, I sailed through menopause. I love to speak to women who say I sailed through menopause, and I'm really happy for them. But the fact it remains that we're still living our lives without estrogen. Okay.
Yes.
And so these potential health consequences of heart, brain, and bone still exist. And anyway, she sailed through, but she said the one thing was my memory. And so now that she's been really interested and learning more, and so she's thinking, HRT for the brain, I wonder, and so the thing, the jury's out on that window at the moment. But what they do say is an indication for HRT is being under the age of 60. Is that what you
Yes.
understand?
Yeah. You don't really want to. I mean, someone who's almost gone through menopause,
Mm.
really, yeah,
Yeah.
that is why you talk about the lock.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that's
so
right. And so actually, it increased. There's a potential if you take it after the age of 60, having had nothing up until that point, it can.
it's pointless.
Well, not only that, potentially detrimental in terms of
Yeah,
heart and stroke. Is I think is what I'm.
it does depend what they take again,
Right.
because if you just take a pessary,
Oh yeah.
I mean, let's face it, there are lots of women in their 60 who still want to have sex life.
Yeah. Why could I forget?
I know.
Yeah. Okay. So well,
So
yeah.
you can have a pessary, you can have a cream, you can have topical
Mm.
estrogen. Um,
Yeah, and I suppose this is the thing for me that I'm sort of thinking of, particularly either tablet or a patch, sort of systemic
yeah,
issue
yeah,
particularly. But yes,
yeah,
absolutely. And so the jury's out. There's still a lot of research to be done. Well, I say the jury's out. What I mean is, with regards to that, there's still research to be done on the effects of HRT on venous thromboembolism risk, that risk of clots, and the HRT on dementia. Uh,
yeah,
Definitely, there's still work to be done. And then, of course, we've got the women who are subject to breast cancer and the treatment that follows, and
exactly.
that's a whole nother conversation, isn't it?
Yes, there is. Apparently, so in the last update I did, a specialist who was speaking, she said that with the cancer consultant on the board, so you don't do it just as a GP, you do it as a team. You can give a woman again that pessary and that cream to make, just the sexual life more pleasurable. And there are women who go quite early on in life through breast cancer, which is triggered by estrogen. Now, I've got two colleagues, and one of them is in her late 30s, early 40s, and one in early 50s, and they both gone through breast cancer, and they survived. They come the other side and are back at work. I mean, you wouldn't think that they gone through anything if you didn't know them before.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was talking about HRT with them, and one is a GP, one is a nurse. The GP is the women's health specialist in a practice, so she knows all about it. And she
Yeah.
said, yes, I know the theory, but knowing that my cancer was triggered by estrogen, I would stay away even from a cream.
Mm.
So, because you don't want to give it not even a drop, because it feeds on estrogen basically, and you don't really want to be where you were. So, um,
So,
yes,
so yeah, I mean, there are other options under those circumstances, but
exactly.
we are specifically speaking about HRT today. So we'll
Yeah,
be on
yeah, yeah,
so the other thing, I suppose, that we mentioned the protective benefits for heart, bones, and the brain. And I'm particularly interested in bones because of my background as a physiotherapist. Um, and so the problem is that we understand that HRT has this protective effect on bone and bone loss, protects against bone loss, but that it's not in the guidance to prescribe HRT to prevent bone loss.
yes,
So there's this kind of slight discrepancy in that regard, and if and then we start to think about evaluating our risk of osteoporosis, which is this loss of bone. And they talk about the FRAX score,
yeah.
the fracture risk score.
Mm,
And so one of the key things that indicates your risk of fracture is having had a fracture. I'm like, okay. So, and this is often the case, that it's only when we've had a fracture that,
But
that we start to get looked at. And actually, I do have someone that I've worked with, a client of mine, who had a hip fracture prematurely in her late 40s, and still at that point, HRT wasn't a consideration as a preventative measure. So, I feel like there's kind of a gap here.
yeah, there is. Definitely. And is a known factor that actually a typical menopausal woman will be a bit more hunched down, bit weight around the middle. I mean, yeah. And cardiovascular disease will go higher in risk because all the weight around the middle, which is sluggish metabolism, and then you fracture that makes you look, that kind of hunched woman. And who wants to look hunched? Not me, thank you. It's not nice.
So, but this is not sexy, is it? It's not sexy to talk about bones. It's like bones, everybody starts to nod off if you start to talk about bones. But actually, a hip fracture and bone loss there's quite a strong familial connection. So this is one of the indications for HRT is this strong connection between familial risk of bone loss. So if there's somebody in your family, look through the albums, and if there's somebody in your family who is kyphotic and rounded over in the upper back area, if you know that your granny had a hip fracture, then this is giving you a clue as to your future, because a lot of times we don't think about these things until after the fact. And, for all these women who sail through the menopause, we're still living without estrogen at the end of the day.
Saying that, my mummy sailed through the menopause. She never knew this menopausal, and I went completely. One, it was early, but she was quite early. She was 44, 45, and I was 39, so it was quite early for perimenopause and early menopause. And I had the whole list and then added on, one symptom that I never knew until I had menopause, and reading through the list, it's called formication. And he's literally feeling like ants are crawling up your legs. And that is what I was like, what is that? Yes. So I had every symptom in a book, yet my mom had nothing. So we have to remember it's not just our mothers. We come with 50-50 baggage from both sides of the family, and who knows from 50-50 from before. That they did not even they got passed on to us, but they didn't necessarily manifest in generations before. So even if you don't have, someone in your family who's hunched up and
Well,
looking in bad shape, shall we say, where it's nothing to pinpoint on it, and they're all together, you don't know really what you inherit. So it is healthy to have a bit of estrogen. I do like when I see patients women come in clinic and they say, I just want to sail through, and I'm like, okay, sails through. I want to do it naturally. I'm thinking, how is that? No, you can't say too much. But even then I would explain. I said, look, if you do get to a point where things don't get quite right, and these are the symptoms and this is the sites you can look at, and refer, just come back to it, look at it again, because it's not gonna hurt you. You can try it. And I do encourage women a lot, because it is this kind of, I don't know, a bit of hero type thing. I've gone through it. It's nothing. And the consultant who did the update, she said she hears women a lot saying, but lots of women gone before me through it, and I didn't have menopause so many years ago. And she said, yeah, so many years ago, women didn't live longer than 30, 35 because they died, a lot of them, in childbirth. So how are you comparing the past with the present when actually we are alive because of more medication, of more treatments and different lifestyles? So
Well, and that's it. Women are not just living longer, but we're living productive lives, working lives for a whole lot
exactly.
longer. The days of giving up work when you were pregnant and had children, that day is gone. And
Yes.
so now we're trying to hold our own in the workplace, and so there's no comparison whatsoever with those
No.
previous generations. And you're right. It's tempting to think that I wear a badge. I did it without estrogen, but but the thing is that we don't necessarily know. 30% of us will develop bone loss in the region of 30% will go on to have significant amounts of bone loss. 30% of women might be classed as fast bone losers. We don't know who's in that bracket. We don't know if
Wow.
it says or not. So, in the absence of knowing, and with
Mm.
sort of prevention is better than cure hat on, if
Yeah.
and if we know that it's not possible for every woman, but to think that doing it the hard way, it's not a tough mudder, is it? It's not just a weekend jaunt. It's years, 5 to 7
Yes.
years of our lives that we could potentially. For me personally, I had about 5 years, starting at 45, and actually I was 51 when I had my last period, and so that's 6 years if your maths adds up, and those were 6 years that I think I would quite like back, because
Yes.
when I was living through them, it was a little bit like being on a treadmill every day, feeling like you were not living, you were existing. And I don't want
Yes.
that for any other human, because it was not fun. And now with the as the prize patch on the back of me, uh,
Yeah.
it's a whole nother day and a whole nother dawn.
Yeah.
Um, so I think, do your homework, know your
Exactly.
facts, and
Yes.
find, maybe the first professional you speak to, maybe not the right professional, maybe not the person
Mm.
who's just been on the update. Uh,
Yeah.
so keep looking, and be your own advocate. Inform yourself. Uh,
Yes.
Information is power, and if you're in any doubt, listen to our podcast. How about that?
Yes. Yeah. There is a British Menopause Society.
Of course.
Women can have a look. Um, there is an International Menopause Society. Um, and the Endocrine Society is all to do with hormones. They have a lot of information. There are um, a lot of sites, a lot of informed places where you can go and find out more. And yeah, you're right. Don't stop searching. Don't stop looking. Don't just stop with the first person. Just have a bit more of an
Yeah.
informed
Yeah,
look.
and know that the risks are different for different people.
Exactly.
If you have digestive issues, for instance, if you
Mm.
have absorption issues, then your risk is greater. Your risk of bone loss, I'm talking specifically about,
Yeah.
is greater.
Yeah.
If you have taken prolonged doses of steroids, your risk is
Oh,
greater.
definitely. Yeah.
Um, and so know these things. Alcohol, more than 3 units a day. Okay, and that actually, I don't quite. What's a unit again? I forget. I tell you what,
Well, it's a small glass of wine. It's a small glass of wine. But I
small
tell you,
steps. Yeah.
yeah, I tell you the one that I would be bereaved. I can cope with the wine part of it, but it's the caffeine which
Oh,
I find difficult. And am I right to think that actually we lose calcium? Is that right through
yeah,
taking
yeah,
too much caffeine?
yeah. Caffeine leaches calcium, alcohol, um, oxalates. Oxalates is something you find in spinach as it goes. Um,
Oh,
yeah, so we're supposed to wilt our spinach to
okay.
yeah, to reduce the amounts of oxalates. And I suppose you do have to eat quite a lot of spinach, but you know what? I love spinach and I eat quite a lot of it. So I have taken to wilting it.
Yeah,
It's quite nice actually, and then you can even eat more of it. So that's so yeah, but know these curious facts. I love curious facts like that.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, caffeine, alcohol, digestive issues. There's lots of things that contribute, in the broadest sense, to our overall health. And I
yeah.
think most of those, probably apart from the spinach one, uh, are lifestyle factors that we know probably we would do better to have less of.
Yeah.
Um,
But then it's still beneficial to have a glass of red wine, isn't it? Or any wine, I think it was proven. The
yeah,
antioxidants, which actually, when it comes to heart disease, reduces the heart disease. So this is such a fine balance because on
well,
one hand,
yeah, it is. The only thing I always am curious about is who paid for the research, because what we do know is that there is
yeah,
bias in research. And so
mhm,
interrogating these sources, and I mean, this was the thing where it went wrong in the beginning with this HRT
yeah,
debacle. This is where it all went wrong because, the research was flawed. And so this happens.
yeah,
Interrogating research is not the specialist area of the man or woman on the street, is it?
mm,
It's difficult. But
yeah,
if you just look who funded the research for one, that might just give
yes,
you a clue as to the biases. The
mm,
chocolate companies that fund the research that tell us how good chocolate is, for instance. And good quality,
yeah,
70% or more cocoa solids.
no,
Maybe
yes,
there are some beneficial antioxidants contained within that kind of chocolate, but not all chocolate is equal. It's same as wine. Not all wine
yeah,
is equal. And if you're talking
yes,
sulfates and sulfites, and it's jam packed full of sulfites, you've got to weigh it up, haven't you? Which
yes.
anyway, we're going off at a tangent.
I know we are.
But so we know we're learning more and more all the time, and there is more
Mhm,
research to be done. But for the most part, right now, what we do know is that there are beneficial uh, health protective qualities that we can
yes.
receive as a result of hormone replacement therapy,
Mm,
and so it's worth considering your health future, and
yes.
and where that fits into your health future. So, well, thank you so much for your expertise. I really appreciate that you came along and shared this expertise with us. And we'd love to see you again. If there's anything else that people think they'd love to ask Sorina, maybe in a month or 6 weeks' time, she could make another appearance. So thanks so much, Sorina. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Philippa. It's a pleasure.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Bye now.
Bye.